Hey folks, I thought I'd film a little tutorial video here on a new module that I've been playing with. Now, I do 4th edition adventures, but we're using the 5e rules and we're using Foundry as our VTT. But because I'm using 4e adventure modules, I have to manually import all of the monsters and their powers into Foundry. And as you can see from what I have on the screen here, I've done a lot of work to do this. These are all of the 4E monsters. These are my named NPCs, and these are all of the monster features that I've had to manually type in all of their feats. And usually this is done by creating an actor and then adding all of the stuff that goes along with that actor. So it takes a long time. And I've done this for Pyramid of Shadows, Assault on Nightworm Fortress, which we're playing through right now, and I'm starting to do, I've done Death's Reach, and I'm starting to do, what's the last one called? Sorry. City of the Ghouls or something like that. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name of them. So these are the 4th edition campaign modules that were released, which I have PDF copies of. And I've always wanted my players to get up to level 20. So I've been slowly getting my players up to level 20 by using those. I'm not a good... myself, I'm not good at creating homebrew stuff like from scratch, so I like to follow adventure modules. But typing all that information in takes quite a bit of time, and I've often asked people on the Foundry Discord, is there any way of just importing from a comma-separated variable file or an Excel spreadsheet powers and creatures into Foundry? And I was often told, well, you could probably figure out how to code it, but I'm not much of a coder, so I figured that would probably take longer than me just typing them in. I did delve in it a little bit, and I mean, if you're playing around with Foundry, you're probably learning a few macros here and there. But recently, I was just, perusing the modules list here in Foundry, and one of them popped up, which I'm probably not going to be able to find right now, called Data Toolbox. So let me just quickly find it here. So there it is right there. Data Toolbox or Foundry VTT. And when I went to the information, it says tools for generating and manipulating data or compendiums. So for example, it can be used for generating a compendium from a CSV file. So I was like, this is probably exactly what I'm looking for. So I went to the project URL and started looking at what it has to offer. So generate a compendium from a CSV import, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. So I decided to give it a try. Now, it does require a little bit of knowledge of how Foundry saves information. So I'm just going to share with you how I discovered this, and maybe it'll be helpful for you if you have homebrew stuff or whatever you might want to do. So I clicked on generate a compendium from a CSV, and so let's talk about the first thing you need to do. So I'm going to go back to Foundry here, and the first thing you need to do is install it. So I'm not going to go, I'm assuming that you know how to install things in Foundry, okay? But when you do install it, and I'll just show you that I do have the module here. So Data Toolbox is right here, okay? The first thing you're going to want to find are the macros. So it actually tells you that in the on the web page of how to do this. If you go into the compendium packs, now I have the compendium folders module installed, so I can sort my things a little bit better here. But so a lot of the newer compendiums that come in always go under default. So if you go under wherever your macros show up. Mine are going to show up under default here. And you find the data macros, which, excuse me, right here, data macros, okay? And it says data toolbox. If you click on that, you've got two macros, okay? So the one that you're interested in first is going to be the show toolbox one. So I'm just going to switch scenes and I'll come back in a second. So I've actually been testing this out in a world that I'm not using here, so I wanted to go to that world to show you what I've done. So here's the data macros compendium open, and I just drag the show toolbox onto the macro bar down here, okay? Now when you click on that, it's going to ask you for two different files, a source file and a template file, and this is where my real problem started. So if I go back to the web page here, it says all that information here, okay, that I just showed you, and it says see also tutorials. So before I go to that, it says the utility reads the input file line by line and generates an entry into the compendium by using the provided template. It requires a data or a source file to be structured and stored using a CSV format. So you do need to know what CSV format is. That just stands for comma separated variable. You can generate this with Excel. You can probably generate it with Google Sheets as well. And there's a sample, okay? So you can actually go and see what the sample looks like. And there's a sample template for creatures. Now, when I clicked on this, all that the sample template shows you is how to bring in the creature's name, type, and abilities. So I wanted to be able to bring in all their feats and you know, HP and all that stuff. Now I have not gotten to the point where I'm creating characters yet. I'm actually debating on whether I still want to do that manually or not. What I decided to do was the thing that takes me the longest time in creating my homebrew characters or creatures I should say, is to type in their feats. So, you know, what are their attacks? What are their special features and all that stuff? So I decided, well, maybe that's where I should start. Okay. So if you go to the tutorial, it does explain how to import monsters from a certain database. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to figure out how to bring in feats. So in the tutorial, let's go check out what's in this tutorial. So when you click on the tutorial, and this is all from the creator's website here, it explains to you step by step how to import these monsters from this website. And it tells you how to generate your CSV and all that stuff. And then at one point, it says to prepare the template. Now, this is where it started to get a little bit difficult for me, so I'm hoping to maybe save you some time here. It tells you to go to a newly created world, create a new actor in that world, and then go to the actors.db file and find the information for that actor. So this is what I did, okay? I actually just went to one of my pre-created worlds. So if you right click on your Foundry icon, you can go to browse user data. If you go to your data folder, go to your worlds folder, and then my world is called H series. Open up the data, and there's your actors database. All right. Now I'm going to open this up in Notepad. And let me bring that into the screen here. So this is what you're going to see. Okay. And I was a little scared when I first saw this, right? But I have done a little bit of coding, so I know that this is probably just organized in some sort of manner to help you see the data if you actually had to find like specific tags or whatever, all right? And you can see here that there's an opening bracket with a quotation that says ID. And from what I gather, every creature, character, NPC that you create in Foundry is going to get a randomized code attached to its ID. And if you look a little bit further down, there's another ID here. Now that is a separation between two different creatures. All right. So what I did is I selected the first one, and you can see the name is a bat here. Okay. And I copied that. And then I went back to the tutorial, and it suggests to go to this website to check to see what the actual code looks like if it's formatted properly. So let's go do that. I'm just going to open this up in a new tab. And you can see that I had one here previously, but I'm just going to clear that information out. Delete that. And I'm just going to paste the stuff that I just copied. Okay, so clearly there's a lot of information here. If you click on convert, gosh, I'm forgetting what to click on here. Is it validate? Convert JSON to, no, beautify. There we go. Sorry, I was forgetting what button to press. So if you click on format beautify, it's going to, if it can read it, if you've selected the right amount of code, and it has to be between that first ID and the next ID, it'll actually write it out in a format that's a little bit easier to see. And I started to see some interesting patterns here. There's a data section that opens up a bracket here, and you can see the abilities are strength. The value is 2. So this is how you would start setting the values for your character's abilities and stuff. But I was interested in feats. So I had to find the section where feats started. And I realized that that section is called items. So I kept scrolling down, and I'm wondering if I can search here. Let me see. Okay, so there's the items section that starts. And each item also has its own code, okay? But some of these values here will, well, okay, so the first one I should probably talk about is the type. So I'm entering feats. This could be weapons. I'm not sure what all the other values are. I'm specifically looking at feats. So that's the one that I'm using for all of my entries. But you could have a variable for that to change it to whatever you want it to create here, okay? You have a description. So there's going to be a value that you're going to want to put in for a description of what this feat is, all right? The activation, is it one action? Is it one bonus action, et cetera, et cetera? The duration, I never use duration, but in Foundry you can have it last for, you know, 1 round or whatever it might be. Your targeting, this would be stuff like, is it one creature? Is it one, or is it 5 square feet for like a template to show up, et cetera, et cetera. Your range, is it, does it have a range of like 20 to 60 feet? So the low value, the long value, and then the units. So all of this information is what Foundry imports to be able to create a weapon or a feat, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So this was the start of my journey of trying to figure out how to do this to code properly. Now, if we go back here, you'll notice that right here, they talk about, the creator of the module talks about the variables that have to be created. So everywhere where I stated, like for instance, the name of the feat, you have to put in a variable, and that variable is written with 2 curly brackets. Now, you do have to be careful, and I'm not 100% sure about this, so the creator would have to, explain this, but I believe that anything that is text has to be within quotes, and anything that's a number value is not in quotes. So you'll see here that the name of the character, which is going to be text, is within quotation symbols, but the strength value, which is going to be a number, is not in quotation symbols. These brackets are there as placeholders that are going to import the CSV information, the comma separated variable information, into those positions. So I knew that I had to create a JSON file that was a template for the feats that I wanted to import. So this is where I had to start trying to figure out the coding that I would use for this. So what I did to help myself here is I downloaded Notepad++. Now Notepad++ is basically a notepad that allows you to properly format code. And I had to format JSON code, which means I had to actually download a plugin for Notepad++. I'm not going to go over that procedure. It's really not that difficult. You can just look into, download plugin for JSON++. Now, there are template files given in Foundry. So if you go to your user data and go to data and modules, under data toolbox, you can go to the samples, and there are some samples here of what to do for those JSON file templates. However, this is the item template one that is open right here. And unfortunately, this is for a loot type. Now, somebody might want to create a loot type and multiple ones. So you would use this as your guide. But I wanted to create a feat. So what you can do, and I'll just show you here. If I create a new file, I'm just going to paste. So this is like all of that information from the bat creature that I showed you on the web page that checks the validation of the code. In Notepad++, basically, if you go to plugins and you go to JSON viewer and you say format JSON, it'll format it in a much easier way to read the information. And I just focused in on the items section, like I had shown you before, which is basically right here. And I looked at one feat and looked at all of the information. So you'll notice here I have pickup sticks showing up, which is another module. And that is also part of the items section, and it is related to the same item echolocation. But from what I understand so far, that hasn't been an issue, and I only did the specific item section. I didn't worry about any of the other modules that have been installed. Okay. And I created this template. So I just took basically that section for an item, and I followed the idea that you start with the name from the template that was given in the Foundry folder for data toolbox. And I basically just replaced anything that I knew that I was going to have to put in there with a tag, if you will, or a variable that will be replaced when when data toolbox merges it with the comma separated variable file. So this is the name of the feat, and I'm only doing feats, so I'm leaving that as a constant. This is the description. That's where it's going to go. The type. So, what is the activation? What is the cost? So is it an action? Is it a legendary action, etc.? What is the cost for that? What is the target value? What is the range, etc., etc. So you'll notice that those values, by the way, the ones that aren't in quotes are showing up in red. Notepad++, I'm assuming this is because that's not actual JSON code. I think that's a placeholder for the comma separated variable merge with the JSON file. So it's not recognizing it as actual code, and it's kind of telling you that there's something wrong there. But when I formatted it the first time, it said there was some sort of error, but it was still able to format it. If it's not able to format it at all, that's because there's an error that it can't read somewhere, and you're going to have to try to figure that out. But these red highlighted things aren't an issue. Those are the variables for the comma separated variable merge. Okay, so all of these double bracket things are all variables that I'm going to need. Okay, so let me show you the comma separated variable file. So this is what it looks like. Now I have a whole bunch of information already put in here because I've already started making feats. All right, but this word here, name, will match this tag here, name. Okay, and then description will match that tag description, and they have to be perfectly written. Okay, so make sure you don't make any mistakes. Now, knowing spreadsheets, I wanted that row to be highlighted in bold. So I bolded it, and I also made it not move. So I locked it in place so that as I scroll down here, I'll always be able to see those titles. And another thing I did is for some of these entries, like in Foundry, they have a drop-down menu. I wanted to have that drop-down menu so that I could actually much easier just find the one that I needed. You do that with what's called a data validation. So if you go to data here and you type on data validation, I'm not going to teach you how to do that. You'll have to look it up if you want to do that. You can choose a list. So I made another sheet and I put a list of all of the drop-down values from Foundry that match the content that I needed for that specific entry. Now, I did have a little bit of trouble with this. I had to figure out what all of these words were, and I had to do that by going into Foundry. And from what I understand, and I tried to get some help on the Discord, and somebody did try to help me. I believe it was Kandashi. I can't remember the username there, but said that there's a macro you can use that can pull out information from the console. I couldn't figure that out. So what I did instead, and I think I can maybe show you this, if I open up a feat here, I'll just go to my data toolbox. So you can choose what compendium name you want. So these are some of the feats that I've created. Actually, let me pick one that has actual damage to it. You have to open up one of the feats already, and you actually have to import it or you won't be able to see this happening. So I imported it here. I'm going to open it from the items sidebar here, and I'm going to go into the by pressing F12, the console for Foundry. Okay, so if I go to details and change melee spell attack, let's say we change it to saving throw. All right, so you can see that something changed in the console. Now, I'm running Mars, which is another module, so I don't know if it's going to be different if you're not running Mars, but just was trying things out here, and I noticed that it said the word item right here. I opened this up, and right there is the word data. Okay, so I opened that up, and then I started to notice that some of these words are going to match what those words were in the CSV and in the tags for the code. So I opened up, and this one here says data right here and name, and there's Ghoul King's Gift, which is the same name as that feat. So I opened that up. So it's an action type, and if you look right here, it says action type and save. So this is saving throw, but that transforms into save, and I didn't know that, right? So if I change it to, let's say, ability check, and I go down here and I find that same value again, so I'll just open up this Mars, open up this one, go to data, open up the data again. So action type, a bill right there. So I had to figure all of those out because I was trying to type out the full words and it wasn't working, and I went and found out that there's specific codes for each one of those. Okay. So once I figured that out, I made all of these drop-down menus, and now I can just type in the name of the feat, what is its description, the cost. I have a drop-down for this for whether it's a different type of action, the target value, the target units. Okay, so that's like one creature or one feat squared, and feat is FT, so I had to figure that out. If you don't have to change anything, you do have to put the word null in there, because otherwise, in the web page for the instructions on how to do this stuff, it does say that the data has to be clean, and I'm not going to be able to find where that says that right now, but that just means that if it's a a number value, it can only be number values. If it's a text value, it can only be text values. So if for instance, I got errors here in the dice damage section because this is considered text because it's a mixture of numbers and text. One of the damage abilities of one of the monsters said the creature just takes 12 damage. Well, I couldn't just put a 12 here because it didn't read it as text, it read it as a number, so that didn't work. But the damage types, I have a drop down for that. The different types of saving throws, the different types of saving abilities, whether you have a recharge die. So in Foundry, some of your feats can have a recharge, which is right here. And you can put like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 as what is the result for the recharge. So that is controlled here. You just put a number instead of null. And then these were a little bit tricky in Excel because for some reason, if you write true or false in Excel, it writes them as capital letters, and the capital letters didn't work when I did the import. So I had to write out some code here for true and false, which was lower true and lower false, which are lowercasing those values. And that's my data validation for those two. So it does work now. And I'm going to try this live here and see if this works. I am going to actually delete all of these compendium entries. So toolbox data, if I go here, I should be able to say delete compendium. So it is gone now. Okay. If I click on here, and what you do is you select your files. So I brought in my template feat advanced CSV, and I brought in my template feat advanced JSON, and I put those, if I go into my user data here, in modules under data toolbox. And now that I'm thinking about it, this might not be the best thing to do because the next time I update data toolbox, it's going to delete that folder. So I'm actually, or possibly delete it. So I'm actually going to copy that and paste it somewhere else, and I'll come right back. Okay, so I've got a copy of those now just in case something goes badly wrong. But I'm going to click on generate compendium. Now it is going to give me an error because I do have a bunch of open entries down here that don't have anything in them yet. I just, copied that down, so I had a lot of entry space. If I go generate compendium, so I did get some errors here because of those extra entries. But if I go to the compendium, I called it data toolbox feats this time, or toolbox feats right here. There are all those feats. And they should have the correct information in here. One action, the damage, the piercing, which came in from the CSV here. So I think this is going to save me some time when it comes to typing all that information in, just because I don't have to repeatedly click on all of the different boxes to fill them in. It'll just do them all at the same time, I think. So I just thought I would share that information with you. You might find it useful. Let me know in the comments. See you soon.